As we are another week closer to the start of the NHL season, it's time to officially start the power rankings of the Metro Division. And where do the Hurricanes fit in a revamped division?
Your Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everyday for making this your first listen of the day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I am your host, Zach Martin. I am the Carolina Hurricanes credentialed beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, where I also do a weekly column on the Chicago Wolves called Wolves Weekly. I am the co-host of The Surge Cast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a fun Monday edition of the show, as I stated at the start, that we are going to be officially doing the power rankings starting here in the month of August and looking at the Metro Division and seeing where the teams stack up as of right now on August 19th. Very interesting to see how all that breaks down with some of the good amount of moves that happened this offseason, especially in the Metro Division. And then towards the end of the show, we're going to do some front office moves, just recapping some new faces and some promotions within the Carolina Hurricanes organization. So now, jumping into the rankings to start off the show, we're going to go eat through one, just so that way we can kind of talk about some of the teams that are kind of on the up, but not necessarily where they need to be in terms of looking at maybe a top 4 spot within a division and maybe vying for a playoff spot. And we should go over some roster lineups and just seeing the possible changes of who's with the team now and how does that look for certain clubs as, like I said, we get closer to the 24-25 season. We are going to start off with the number 8 team, and I think it's going to be the Columbus Blue Jackets when you look at how the team is shaped up. So they do have one new face on the offense, and that is Sean Monahan, who he's projected to be the first line center. Other than that, you look at maybe Denton Matejchuk being on the defense, and it's kind of your only two possible changes as of right now. Ken Johnson did get a contract extension. He should hopefully be back at some point. Still technically out on IR. Patrick Laine is out of the players' assistance, but from what we're hearing, reports from Don Waddell saying that he doesn't want to come to the Columbus. He doesn't want to play for the Blue Jackets, so that's a kind of interesting situation that plays out. But you look at the goaltending situation, it's Elvis Merzlikins, Daniel Tarasov, still running it back from last year, and we saw how much that was kind of a struggle for the team last year. Just going from the defense to the forwards, you got Zach Werenski, David Severson, Ivan Provorov, and David Jiricek kind of being your top 4. And then it's Matejchuk and probably Eric Goodbranson filling out that last line. Looking at the forward core, Gaudreau, Monahan, Marchenko, possibly Ken Johnson as your second-line left winger with Adam Fantilli and Igor Chinikov, Boone Jenner as your left wing third line, and the captain of the team, Cole Sillinger, with his new contract possibly coming up. You got Dmitry Voronkov, Justin Danforth, Sean Corrali, and Matthew Olivier. Overall, you're kind of basically running the same team back. I know with certain contracts, you kind of have to figure out how that's going to work out. Like I said, you do bring in Sean Monahan, which is kind of surprising to a lot of people, but you got your kind of bona fide number 1 center to not having to throw Adam Fantilli to the Wolves necessarily. You don't really have to shove Boone Jenner to the first-line center spot. So it's a good pickup for them. Overall, still a young team for the most part. Did they do a lot to maybe move the needle? Not necessarily. I mean, again, Denton Matejchuk probably coming in is a good move for them. He's really young, really, really good. The contract situation is Severson and Provorov is still going to be something to look at for the Jackets. Goaltending, I think, is going to be really the biggest question mark, because you saw how much of it's a situation where where do you look at with Merzlikins and Tarasov and how they work out? We saw how much Merzlikins struggled last year. Tarasov, what's possible with him? So how that usually works out. But as of right now, it's going to be the Columbus Blue Jackets kind of sitting at that number 8 spot in terms of the, as of right now, Metro rankings. Now, the next team that we got coming up, and I think they played really well last year, but we saw towards the end of how much of the fall off there was for them. And while they do get a big boost in one of their forward positions, I'm still kind of curious of how the defense is going to play in another, just like the Jackets. What's the overall question of the goaltending situation? And number 7 is the Philadelphia Flyers. They do get Matvei Michkov, which is kind of a big move because the Flyers are getting him 2 years early, possibly first line right wing, and that's kind of your only real addition to the forward core. Like I said, you got Tyson Forster, Sean Couturier, look at Owen Tippett, Morgan Frost, and Travis Konechny, who got a contract extension. Farabee, Scott Lawton, Bobby Brink, Noah Cates, Ryan Foley, and Garrett Hathaway. Overall, not a bad forward core. You're kind of curious of how that bottom 6 looks like, how that's going to play out. Scott Lawton was very highly looked at in terms of the trade deadline this past season. Bobby Brink is young, supposed to be really good. Some people were looking at Joel Farabee as well. No, Cates another young guy. Same with Ryan Foley. You look at Garrett Hathaway, who is a former Washington Capital. Your top 6 could be somewhat good. Just depends on how Konechny really plays. Same thing with Sean Couturier. Can Owen Tippett take it to another level? Same thing with Tyson Forster. What does Morgan Frost do? And how does Matvei Michkov play in the North American game? Defense-wise, you're kind of running back with the same crew who kind of fell apart at the back end of the season. Cam York and Travis Sanheim. Nick Seeler, who I think has played pretty decently, of course, and they got Jamie Drysdale in the Cutter Gauthier trade after he didn't want to be with the Flyers. And then you got Igor Zamula and then Rasmus Ristolainen, which still one of the biggest Y trades for the Flyers, and of course with that contract extension as well. Overall, I think the defense is okay. You really got to hope that York and Sanheim can kind of carry the load, and then hopefully Seeler and Drysdale and Zamula kind of take it to the next level, and hopefully Sanheim stays healthy. In terms of, they have Ryan Ellis on IR. And then looking at the goalie situation, you have Ivan Fedotov, who's going to be over, he's going to play possibly backup role to Sam Ersson, who did really well for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms for the last few years. Kind of came into a tough situation last year with the whole Carter Hart situation of him having to leave. And how John Tortorella said that they kind of rode Sam Ersson a lot and kind of put him in a bad spot, tired him out. And it's something to – it's just like the Jackets. How can the goaltending be? And if the goaltending is still going to be a question mark, then I think that's going to be where the Flyers kind of dip back down to where I think they were supposed to be last year, because a lot of people had them like 7th or 8th in the division. I think they really played out of their minds to start the year, kind of wanted to do well for John Tortorella. But overall, I think it's just they played way above their heads. And I think this is going to be kind of a season where you're kind of seeing them come back to earth, especially with how you kind of got a top pair defense and then a bunch of question marks behind them. And in the forward core, you have an okay bottom 6, but can your top 6 kind of lead the way for the Philadelphia Flyers? So that's kind of why I think that the Flyers are coming in at 7 in terms of the Metro rankings for the Metropolitan. Now going across the state to their in-state rivals, and this one was kind of interesting for who was going to be 5 and 6 for me. And I think right now, number 6, if you're looking at how the roster has been built and what they did this offseason, I think it's going to be the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, unlike the Flyers and the Jackets, they did make some multiple moves in addition to trying to revamp this roster. But looking at their forward core overall, you got Ricardo Rakell, Sidney Crosby, and Brian Rust. A very interesting top line in terms of the forwards. You kind of hope Rakell finally, kind of finds that old form they had with the Ducks. Michael Bunting on that second line with Evgeny Malkin and Valtteri Puustinen. Valtteri Puustinen is really good. He played really great with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins in the AHL. Michael Bunting, of course, came over in that Jake Gensel trade from, of course, everyone knows, the Carolina Hurricanes. So interesting to see how that works out. They did pick up Anthony Bolivier, former Islander, and he's kind of looking at to be paired up with Lars Eller and Kevin Hayes, former Blue, former Philadelphia Flyer. Blake Lizotte kind of came over, former LA King, and then Cody Glass, they're looking at as a fourth line center in the most recent trade from the Nashville Predators. And then you got Drew O'Connor kind of running out that top, that bottom part. Overall, I think the top six is kind of okay. You do have Crosby still because, of course, it's Crosby. Brian Rust is still pretty decent. Michael Bunting is still good for what he can do for a team of Evgeny Malkin. Of course, it's Evgeny Malkin. Pustonen is young, but really, really good for, like I said, in the AHL. Kind of showed some flashes last year for the NHL team. Then you look at your bottom six, you got four new guys. Like I said, Bolivier, Hayes, Lizotte, and Glass. You kind of know what Hayes and Bolivier can do. What can Blake Lizotte do for the Penguins? And the same thing with Cody Glass. It's a little bit of a better bottom six compared to maybe the Jackets, maybe even the Flyers too. So while the top six is maybe I was a couple question marks, at least the bottom six is a little bit better, but I don't think they're kind of going to leapfrog the team who's technically going to be in fifth. Looking at the defensive groups, you still have the same guys: Marcus Pettersson, Erik Karlsson. Of course, Karlsson kind of struggled his first year with the Penguins, seeing how they could pick that up. Ryan Graves, who got their huge contract extension, really struggled last year. If you're the Penguins, you hope he kind of has a bounce back. Then you got Chris Letang, of course, a forever Penguin with Malkin and Crosby. And then looking at their bottom pair, you got Matt Grzelcyk, former Boston Bruin, and then Sebastian Aho, the Swedish Sebastian Aho, not the Finnish one, coming over from the New York Islanders as well, along with Anthony Bolivier. In terms of their defensive core, you do get Matt Grzelcyk, who played pretty well for the Bruins. Sebastian Aho, I'm curious to see how he does with the Penguins, unlike what he did with the Islanders, who was okay. You kind of hope Ryan Graves has a bounce back, especially with the contract that he has. You kind of need you kind of need a better production out of him. Chris Letang is Chris Letang. He's going to be good. Hopefully he stays healthy. Nothing scary happens to him because, we've seen all the scary medical issues that he had to deal with over his entire career. Can Karlsson bounce back after that trade coming over from the San Jose Sharks? You kind of hope so, especially if you're Kyle Dubas. Marcus Pettersson, he's been on the up and up, so hopefully he keeps it up as the top left side defensive guy. Looking at the goaltending, kind of running it back once again, you got Tristan Jarry, who seems like every time with the Pittsburgh Penguins goalies, when they give someone an extension, it's kind of an up in the air situation in terms of all that with, is he good? Is he not good? Is the contract too long? And just like with Matt Murray and what they did with the Marc-Andre Fleury, now it's kind of, is this the same thing for Tristan Jarry? Is he good? Or is that contract going to come bite him and the Penguins? And then they brought back Alex Nedeljkovic, looking at a former Detroit Red Wing, former Carolina Hurricane. Possible backup, see how he does for the Penguins this year. That'd be very interesting to keep an eye on. And, of course, on the IR, they have Matthew Nieto. If he comes back, then you're kind of looking at a different possible top six where you slide him somewhere in the bottom six. But like I said, between 5 and 6 for the Metro is a kind of an interesting toss-up of who you want to look at. But I do think that the Penguins are better than their in-state rivals in Philadelphia, and I don't think the Jackets are necessarily. I know they're in 8th in the Metro, but I still think they are on the bounce back. It's just you got to hope for a lot of things to happen for the Blue Jackets. Now, rounding out the bottom part of the Metro Division and coming in at number 5 is the New York Islanders. Now, yes, they did make the playoffs last year, barring the fact that the Flyers kind of fell off, and the Washington Capitals did come in as a wild card team. But in terms of what they did this offseason, not really a whole lot. I mean, yeah, you do sign Anthony Duclair for probably the first signing on free agency day in a long time for the Islanders with Lou Lamoriello. Other than that, not a lot of changes on this entire team whatsoever. I mean, you're kind of maybe looking at, when you got Bo Horvat, Matthew Barzal as your first line, Maxim Tsipsplakov, along with Brock Nelson and Kyle Palmieri, Anders Lee, John Gabriel Pageau, Pierre Engvall, and then Kyle McLean, who just got a contract extension, former junior Carolina Hurricane. Then you got Casey Zizekas and Simon Holmstrom running out your forward group. Like I said, you're kind of bringing the same group back who, as everyone knows, doesn't really score a lot of goals. So it'll be very interesting to see how Anthony Duclair does. You kind of have to hope for a bigger season from Bo Horvat, Matthew Barzal. What does your bottom 6 do? Do you get something out of Pierre Engvall? Does Kyle McLean kind of, pick up from where he did in the playoffs for the Islanders? And then, does Zizekas, Pageau, and Lee kind of pick it up as well for depth scoring for the Islanders? Looking at the defense, Alexander Romanov, Noah Dobson, Adam Pelech, Ryan Pulock, and then you got Mike Riley. And then right now, big question mark is he going to be ready to go with Scott Mayfield. Mostly you're bringing 5 of your 6 back from your defensive core. You got to hope that Noah Dobson continues what he did last year. You hope Alexander Romanov keeps his trajectory going. And then you got to hope that the defensive lockdown of Pelech and Pulock can still be the big thing for the Islanders. In terms of goaltending, nothing really changed there. Ilya Sorokin, Simon Varlamov. Will they continue their run as a top tandem in the league? I mean, we know they can have goaltending. It's just, is the scoring going to be there for the Islanders? And I think it's kind of a bigger – that's why I think it's a toss-up for me at 5 and 6 with them and the Penguins. Because the Islanders didn't really make a lot of moves while the Penguins did. And I think the Penguins kind of maybe have a little bit more going for them. But, of course, it's the goaltending's another question mark for them. And can some of their new forward guys help? Islanders, you just got to hope that the guys get to play and the fact you get more goal scoring out of this team. And can't just rely on the goaltending to kind of save you game in and game out. So it'll be very interesting to see how that works out in terms of the Islanders, but I got them at the number 5 spot. So it'll be very interesting to see what 5, 6, 7, and 8 kind of round out for the bottom group for the Metro Division. So that is the first part of the Metro rankings. Stay tuned for part 2, segment 2 of the show, as we will continue on to 4 through 1. And we'll do that here in a second on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. We're driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need a hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. The one thing I like about Indeed is the fact that how well it just manages your search engine and how you want to look for certain candidates or even look for certain jobs that fit within your credentials and your resume. And by leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. And that, once again, that is Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to segment 2 for Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. And thank you for making this podcast your first listen of the day. But for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On AHL podcast. Locked On AHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So back in segment 1, we kind of went over, 8 through 5 of the power rankings as of August for the Metro Division. Now we get to jump into the top 4. And coming in at number 4 for me is probably one of the biggest movers in free agency. And, a team who did make the playoffs last year, of course, it was very at the last minute and did it as a wild card team, but I still think they might have given themselves a better chance to not have to fight for possibly a last day move where they could actually make a big splash and maybe make the playoffs probably in a wild card spot, maybe fight for that top 3 as well. And I think this team in the Washington Capitals coming in number 4 might make things very, very interesting in terms of the Metro Division. Of course, they got some big additions and a lot of moves this offseason, of course, with Pierre-Luc Dubois coming into that trade. And it'll be interesting to see how he does. Of course, this is after he had that huge 8-year, $8.5 million contract with the Los Angeles Kings, came over like I said, in that trade. It'll be very interesting to see how that works out for him with another team. Didn't work out with the Jackets, didn't work out with the Winnipeg Jets. Goes to the LA Kings for a season, has a really down year, and that's especially for a guy who's making 8.5. You really got to show out for your team. And now he's with the Washington Capitals. So it'll be interesting what he does. Of course, you got Alexander Ovechkin. We got to play. Probably he's going to most likely play his entire career with the Capitals. Still in the hunt for Gretzky's goal record. Dylan Strom, who led the team, for the most part, led the team last year in points, did really, really good for them. Got Tom Wilson, who got a contract extension. Connor McMichael, like I said, PR Luc Dubois. Then you got Andrew Mangiapane, former Calgary Flame. You got Sonny Milano, Hendrix Lapierre, who came out of nowhere last year, played really well for the Capitals. Taylor Radish, former Tampa Bay Lightning and Chicago Blackhawk. Brandon Duhaime, former Minnesota Wild. And then you got Nick Dowd and Alexei Protas running at your forward core. Honestly, overall, I think Mangiapane could do something for the Capitals. Same thing for Radish and possibly Duhaime. The big question mark is, can Pierre-Luc Dubois do something as your second-line center? This is another team he's going to be with. Someone's finally going to click for this guy, and you will see if that happens with the Washington Capitals. Looking at the defense, I think there's a big jump up here for these guys in terms of how their defense looks. You got Jacob Chychrun, former Arizona Coyote, Ottawa Senator. Then you got him with John Carlson, who's been there for his entire career with the Washington Capitals. You got Rasmus Sandin, who kind of picked up his career with the Capitals. Then you got Matt Roy, former LA King. Then you got Martin Fehervary. And then you got Trevor Van Riemsdyk, former Carolina Hurricane. Overall, I think your top four for your defense got significantly better with Chychrun and Matt Roy. You kind of hope that the rest of the group still plays really well. And then hopefully, with Rasmus Sandin, he continues his trend in the top four for the Capitals. And then looking at the goaltending situation, you got Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson. Logan Thompson, former Vegas Golden Knight, who won the Stanley Cup. I'm curious to see how that works out with them, with Lindgren and Thompson kind of being their goaltending tandem for next season. So hopefully that kind of works out for them and see where it goes for the Capitals. Now they do have Nick Backstrom and TJ Oshie on IR. Hopefully they come back at some point, and if they do come back, you slide them in somewhere in the lineup for the forward core. I think your offense just got better with those two in at least. So right now I do the Capitals at 4, but there's a possibility, if they have a good start to the season and kind of show that they're legit and maybe fight for a third spot in the Metro, then I think they could be a team that did really well in the offseason and kind of project themselves from being a fringe team squeaking into a wild card spot to a team who solidified hey, we're making the playoffs regardless, either if it is a wild card or we're stealing the number 3 spot and we're not giving it up. Now, and like I said, that's a coin flip with who is at number 3 for me. Like 2, 3, and 4 is going to be very interesting for the Metro Division in terms of how these teams stack up. And most specifically 3 and 4 could be like the same thing with the Penguins and the Islanders, where it could be a toss-up. The Capitals at 4, and who I have at 3 is also another toss-up team, and that is the New Jersey Devils. Now, you could make the case for them going number 2. After a very bad down year for them, which did deal with a lot of injuries and just the goaltending situation was just not there for them. And the defense was kind of, losing Dougie Hamilton, being down to a lot of guys in the forward core being hurt too. Did hurt the Devils, but if everyone stays healthy this year and kind of be the team we saw 2 years ago, plus the additions they got this offseason, I could see them bouncing back to a number 3 spot, maybe making the wild card as the number 4 team in the Metro, just because of where they finished last year. I think at worst you're looking at a wild card spot, but I do think being number 3 is still a pretty decent spot overall for the Devils, who are, like I said, hopefully coming back from a lot of injuries, and hopefully their new additions kind of help them out as well. Andre Palat, Nico Hischier, who did suffer from some injuries last year, and then Jesper Bratt. Timo Meier, Jack Hughes, who you hope stays healthy this year as well. Dawson Mercer kind of rounds out your top 6, which is overall on paper, that's a really good top 6, all things considered. So as long as those guys can stay healthy and you get a bounce back from Timo Meier, what he's supposed to be, then yeah, I think the Devils could be making a case for a 2, maybe a 1 in the Metro this upcoming season. Looking at the bottom 6, you got Thomas Tatar coming back, and then of course they have Eric Halla as their third line center, and then the addition of Stefan Nason coming over from the Carolina Hurricanes on a big contract boost from making under $1 million to making around 2.3. That's gonna be a tough blow for the Hurricanes, but can't blame Stephanie for going to get the bag, and hopefully, wish him nothing but the best. Then you got Paul Cotter, Curtis Lazar, and Nathan Bastian rounding out your bottom 6. If Tatar can be anything that we've seen from him over his career, then hopefully, that might help the bottom 6. We all know what Steph Nason can do. Really gets injured, plays really well, especially in the greasy areas and on the power play. That's going to be a nightmare for the Hurricanes for the next few seasons. The big question is that fourth line, can Lazar be what he needs to be? Can Nathan Bastian add that scoring depth? And what can Paul Cotter do? Like I said, overall for the entire forward core, the big hope is guys stay healthy for those guys, and we'll be interested to see how that works out for them. Defensive pairings, you got Jonas Siegenthaler. Hopefully he can have another bounce back and keep his trend going. The big hope for them is Dougie Hamilton coming back and staying healthy. Luke Hughes came out last year, showed what he can do. It'll be curious to see what he can do in terms of what his trajectory of his career is going to be. Obviously, Brett Pesce joins them after getting hurt in the playoffs last year, getting a $5.5 million contract. Stinks to lose Brett as well. A lot of miles in that body. Let's see what he can do on the New Jersey Devils as part of the second line pairing with Luke Hughes. That'll be something to keep an eye on. And then you got Brendan Dillon, former Winnipeg Jet, and then Simon Nemec, who is played really, really good with the Utica Comets in the AHL. Really, everyone's really high on this kid, so I'm kind of curious to see how that works out. In terms of defense, still two young guys in Hughes and Nemec, see what they can do. Can Brendan Dillon bring over what he's done in the Winnipeg Jets, along with can Brett Pesce bring over what he did with the Carolina Hurricanes? And then just, can Dougie Hamilton stay healthy? And can Siegenthaler kind of take the next step for the Devils? Goaltending, it was their biggest jump up. Of course, you get Jacob Markstrom in the trade with the Calgary Flames that sent, Ball back to them. And then you got Jake Allen, who's pretty much played everywhere, it seems like, in the NHL. So that's kind of your new goalie tandem. Can that be something that could help the Devils? Because the big question mark last year was the Devils was their goaltending situation. And, can everyone on their forward and defensive crew stay healthy? So that's kind of one of the big things is, can any of those things happen? So overall, I think with the fact that you got some boosts with that, I think the Devils do come in at number 3, just for the fact of how the Washington Capitals did too. So there could be one of those teams. They might flop at some point, maybe, who knows? But like I said, if everyone stays healthy, then I think the New Jersey Devils could make a case for hey, we could fight for a 2, maybe a 1 spot in the Metro Division. And now moving on to the number 2 spot. And it was 1, 2, and 3 were very interesting to see how it worked out, especially with how the number 1 team kind of didn't really lose a lot, but I'm curious to see how they do. The Devils did have a lot of, they did bring in some guys this offseason, and especially how their goaltending situation got better. Can they stay healthy is the big question. Now, number 2, you could say that this team could be a possibly number 3 in the Metro. I would say at the worst, it could be a wild card team at the number 4 spot. Division-wise, I'm not sure how they're going to do. It's a possibility. It just depends on how the number 1 team does, but I could see them coming back in a number 2 once again. Like I said, at the worst, a wild card, but they're going to make the playoffs regardless. And it's going to be your Carolina Hurricanes. Andrei Svechnikov, hopefully he has a bounce back. I know he did pretty decently last year. Of course, he had to deal with coming back from his ACL injury the season before. Got hurt a couple more times during the season. Hopefully he has a full bounce back here. Sebastian Aho, of course, led the team in points last year, 1 point shy of 90. Seth Jarvis had a career year last year. You kind of hope you see a continued trajectory for him, maybe looking at 70 to 75, maybe 80 points for him. Now, the rest of the top 6 should be interesting. Do you bring in Bradley Nadeau if he plays really well in camp in the preseason? Because right now, as the roster is set up, he has a legitimate shot of making it. And of course, I talked to Nick, aka King's prospect, last week, and we kind of both thought that as the roster sits, it might be best to bring in Bradley Nadeau just because of the fact of where we're at right now. Because, barring a trade, there's not a lot of UFAs that's still available for them to bring in someone to fill up the top 6 in terms of the left wing spot. Just very Kotkaniemi, you really have to hope that this guy has a huge bounce back season, because for what he's making at $4.8 million and how long that contract is, you kind of need to see what he did back in October, November last year and continue that throughout the whole entire season. Another shot at the 2C spot. Will he have it for the whole year? It begs to be seen. Martin Necas, of course, we all know, got that 2-year contract extension for $6.5 million per year, jumping up to $3 million. Got your money. Now prove what you can do, and hopefully keep you in Carolina for a longer period of time. So that's kind of like where your top 6 is at right now. You're kind of your question mark is that left wing spot to see who could possibly fill that position, and can just very Kotkaniemi have a bounce back season after last year. Now, looking at your bottom 6, you're probably looking at Jordan Martinook, Jordan Stahl, Jack Roslovic as your third line, because with Jesper Fast, yes, technically is out of his neck brace, still hasn't really been clear to do anything yet, so most likely he might start the season on the IR, and it might be best just to have Jack Roslovic kind of filling into that third line right wing spot, which kind of makes sense of how that works out for them. Then you got William Carrier, who came in from the Vegas, as a free agent from the Vegas Golden Knights, 6 years, $2 million. Still an interesting contract, but overall, not bad. Analytical darling for the fourth line, kind of your Seth Nason replacement. And then you're going to have Jack Drury and maybe Eric Robinson, maybe Brendan Lemieux. That fourth line right wing spot still kind of not the biggest question mark, but there's a couple of guys you kind of figure out where you want to put them in that particular spot. So overall, bottom 6 kind of still looks somewhat the same, minus the additions of Roslovic and Carrier, maybe Eric Robinson. Hopefully Jesper Fast isn't out for too long. Top 6 pretty much the same. Of course, you lose Teuvo Teravainen. Then it's like you got to hope for a bounce back from Kotkaniemi, like I said, and then do you bring in Bradley Nadeau or do you bring in someone else? So kind of a question mark in some places on the forward group. Nothing too terrible. Now the defense, I still think this is where the Hurricanes are kind of still are solidified as a top 5 defense. I still think they're a top 3 defense in the entire NHL. Of course, Jacob Slavin got that 8-year contract extension, which kicks in next year. Brent Burns comes back for his last year with the Hurricanes. Dmitry Orlov's coming into his last year of his 2-year deal. And then you got the addition of Sean Walker, who played for the Colorado Avalanche last year, or also a former LA King in Philadelphia Flyer comes in for a 5-year deal at $3.5, which still is a really good contract, and who's your Brett Pesce replacement. Shane Gostisbehere comes back to the Carolina Hurricanes once again on a 3-year, $3.2 million deal. He's going to be your Brady Shea replacement, possibly top power play minutes as your quarterback, kind of running that group. We saw what he did a couple seasons ago, even though it was a short number of games coming in that trade from the Arizona Coyotes for a 6th-round pick. Very excited to have him back. Had a lot of points last year, did have 56, so hopefully kind of translates that to the Carolina Hurricanes. And right now it looks like they might pair him with Jalen Chatfield, which they did really well together a couple seasons ago. And of course, Jalen Chatfield getting his contract extension of a 3x3. So very fun to see how that works out with those two together. But overall, pretty much the defense stays the same outside of bringing in Walker and Gostisbehere, but I'm really excited to see what Walker can do. He's 26. Really, everyone puts him in high regard. And of course, we all know what Shane Gostisbehere can do. So right now, the defense, to me, still a top 3 in the NHL. That's kind of what puts them kind of over the New Jersey Devils and also the Washington Capitals for the fact that the defense is still really, really good. And still Tim Gleason running the show for the defense. And all of that. Goaltending situation, still Frederick Anderson and Pierre Kochetkov. Freddie comes back. Hopefully he stays healthy this year. Hopefully don't get any scares with the blood clotting issue they had last year. We also, Pierre Kochetkov could do as well. So it'll be fun to see what they can do as a tandem. Honestly, I do think that Pierre Kochetkov should be the 1A for the Hurricanes this year because Anderson's also coming into the last year of his contract, and Pierre Kochetkov's coming into the second year of his 4-year deal, which is $2 million per. I think if you're ready to pass the baton on to the next guy, I think doing it right now with Pierre Kochetkov is probably the way to do it. So that's kind of what you're looking at for your Carolina Hurricanes. Like I said, could they potentially make a move for the number 1 spot? All depends on how the team at number 1 does, but I also can see them still making, maybe falling down to 3 depending on how the Devils do. At the worst is a wild card spot, but overall I still think they're going to make the playoffs regardless. But right now I kind of have them at number 2 just because of how good the defense still is. Goaltending is still there. You kind of know what that you're dealing with that is. Right now it's just how does the forward core all click together with some guys coming in and stuff like that. And of course, if you've done, process of elimination, it's going to be the New York Rangers, former Metro Division winners from last year, and the reigning President's Trophy winners, of course, got bounced by the Florida Panthers in the Eastern Conference Final. For the most part, the entire forward core is coming back. Of course, you got Chris Kreider, Mika Zibanejad. They do add Riley Smith, former Golden Knight, former Pittsburgh Penguin, Timmy Panarin, Vincent Trocheck, Alexis Lafreniere, who did have a massive bounce back season for the Rangers, and kind of someone who might eventually has proven why he was the number 1 overall pick in his draft. So you're looking at that top 6. It's still pretty dang good overall if you look at how the Rangers are set up. Curious to see how Riley Smith does in that top 6, but where Lafreniere is at now, and of course you got Trocheck and Panarin and Kreider and Zibanejad. Yeah, that's a very scary top 6 overall. The question mark for me for the Rangers is how is your bottom 6 going to be? And I think this is where the Hurricanes or the Devils could surprise the Rangers in taking over the number 1 spot. Now you got Will Cooley. Does he stay healthy? How does he do for the Rangers? Same thing for Philip Cheadle. Capo Kakko, that's just like Alex Lafreniere. You got to hope this guy, for the Rangers, the hope for the Rangers fans is you got to hope that he does become that guy that they picked him at number 1 for. You got Jimmy Vesey, you know what he can do. Sam Carrick comes in, and then right now is slotted as Matt Rempe, who's a dude on skates who looks like the main guy who's going to fight. Scoring wise, big huge question mark. Is he going to bring any type of scoring? He's basically just a big body right now. I say that, like I said, right now the biggest question mark for the Rangers is that bottom 6. Can those guys bring some depth scoring and not make the Rangers a top-heavy 2-line team? That begs the biggest question out of all of that. Defense, bringing the entire group back, Ryan Lindgren, Adam Fox, Karen Miller, Jacob Trouba, who's coming in the last year of his deal, was in a lot of trade rumors this offseason, so I'm kind of curious as to how that works out for their captain. Zach Jones and Braden Schneider. As long as, for the Rangers, in terms of the defense, you're bringing them all back. Can they run it back with the defense once again? Like I said, it's just that bottom 6 is going to be the biggest thing for them. Looking at the goaltending situation, you got Igor Shesterkin, of course, who did come back to earth a little bit this last season compared to his Vezina season the year before. Then Jonathan Quick, who somehow has dodged Father Time once again and really had a huge year for the Rangers last year as the backup, kind of carried them for a little while Shesterkin did kind of struggle a little bit. So, like I said, for the Hurricanes and the Devils, you could say it's a possibility of them catching if it's one of those things that maybe it's the bottom 6 kind of bites the Rangers and and the defense can stack up once again like they did last year. So it's a possibility that someone could surprise the Rangers, but right now, just in terms of who you're bringing back from last year's teams overall, looking at some additions, I think the Rangers are still that team who could still control the Metro Division overall. But I think the Hurricanes do have a legitimate shot of saying something about the number 1 spot. It's just how's your bottom 6 deal with some of your additions there? What's your top 6 look like if you bring in Bradley Nadeau or maybe another prospect, or do you sign someone in the offseason? or maybe there's a possible trade that we're still waiting to see happen. So, and then with the Devils staying healthy and stuff like that. But in the comment section, let me know what you think of the August power rankings so far coming into August 18th. Once again, just going back through that list, Columbus Blue Jackets at 8, Philadelphia Flyers at 7, Pittsburgh Penguins at 6, New York Islanders at 5. Then you got the Washington Capitals, New Jersey Devils, your Carolina Hurricanes at number 2, and the New York Rangers at number 1. So let me know what you think of those power rankings. Would you guys move some other teams somewhere else? Do you agree? So let me know what you think about those power rankings. So before we wrap the show, we're going to go into our segment 3, and we're going to do some quick front office moves talk with the Carolina Hurricanes as a new face comes in as an assistant general manager and someone within the organization got a promotion. And we'll do all that here in a second on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said at the end of segment 2, we're going to talk about some front office moves for the Carolina Hurricanes that happened back on Friday. So the Hurricanes made the announcement that Tyler DeLow will be the new assistant general manager for the Carolina Hurricanes. Of course, he's looking over the data analysis and compliance with the NHL salary cap and the bargaining agreement over the last few years. He also spent the last 5 seasons with the New Jersey Devils front office as a senior vice president of hockey strategy and analytics. And he also spent 2 years with the Edmonton Oilers as an analytics consultant. And, of course, he was the guy who did find MC79hockey.com, which was a leading analytics-based hockey blog that basically brought data analysis in the mainstream of hockey. So another big analytical person. And, of course, Score, another big one for hockey bloggers everywhere. And, of course, the Hurricanes are proving that they're going to have probably one of the smartest front offices with another guy who can bring another level to the analytics department in terms of the Carolina Hurricanes and looking at rosters and, how things work out. So congratulations to Tyler, who's going to be an assistant general manager. Now, Eric Tulsky said that about Tyler is that Tyler has an encyclopedic knowledge of hockey data and is both creative and detail-oriented in applying it to building understanding of performance and tactics. He's also an attorney with extensive experience in negotiation and a strategic thinker who sees a big picture. Tyler is a strong manager who cares deeply about employee development. So, yes, he did get his law degree from the University of Toronto and practiced civil litigation in Toronto before working in hockey. So you're talking an analytical mind who loves hockey and is a former lawyer. So that's a huge one for the Hurricanes. Really excited to see what he can do as the assistant general manager. Now, talking about assistant general managers, of course, Eric Tulsky is now the general manager of the Hurricanes, but there's also Darren York, and Darren York got a promotion. He's now the associate general manager, and he's also the general manager of the Chicago Wolves. So very excited for Darren York for seeing that jump up in his promotion. And of course, he will still continue to be the all-player. He'll be involved in all personnel decisions, as well as being the overall person for the amateur scouting, the top dog in that department, looking at player development and the team's draft. And with the Chicago Wolves, it's going to be a situation as the general manager where he'll be, looking over the day-to-day hockey operations for the AHL affiliate up there in Chicago. Of course, he's entering his 16th season with the Carolina Hurricanes, of course, starting out as a video scout back in 2009. So really awesome to see that Darren York is staying with the Hurricanes, a lot longer. Of course, we already knew that, but the fact that he got that boost and promotion. And he's the general manager of the Wolves and still being in charge of all of the amateur scouting and the draft stuff. Now, in terms of what Eric Tulsi said about Darren, he said that Darren has been instrumental in overhauling the way we draft and develop players. In addition to his keen eye for players, he has a strong instinct for organizational process and a thorough understanding of every element of team operations. I am supremely confident that Darren is deserving of an increased role, and I'm proud to work alongside him, Tyler, and the rest of our hockey operations staff as we move forward to our goal of bringing a Stanley Cup back to Raleigh. Of course, we all know how good Darren York is in terms of his development and what he's looking for in players, and of course, drafting and stuff like that as well. So with him being the general manager of the Wolves, that just takes them to the next level of making that team really good once again. Hopefully see some Calder Cup runs, along with the fact that getting some development for young guys like Jackson Blake, Felix Ungerstorm, Scott Morrow, all those other guys, especially with Cam Abbott as the head coach. Having Darren York as your GM is really going to be huge for them. And we'll probably see a Calder Cup playoff really soon, and hopefully a sixth Calder Cup coming back to the Chicago Wolves. But that will wrap up a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode, especially with the power rankings. If you want to keep everything that's going on with me in terms of my coverage of the Carolina Hurricanes, you can follow me on OneSureZach. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. There's a link to in my bio. If you click on that, that's where you can check out all of my articles at the Hockey Writers. Check out where you can listen and watch my other podcasts and Surgecasts on podcast platforms and on YouTube. And with this podcast, you can click on the link to where to listen to this on all podcast platforms. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review, because if you do, I might just read it on the show. On the YouTube side of things, make sure to hit subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Leave the thumbs up to let me know if you like the show as well. And make sure to share with everyone, so they become everydayers just like you, because we are over 940 subscribers. And if we get to 1,000, I might do something special for you guys. But like I said, make sure to, in the comments, let me know what you think of the power rankings, and where would you see the 8 teams be as of August 19th. But I hope everyone enjoyed the Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. I hope everyone enjoys their Monday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.